So welcome to the Thursday evening session of our doctoral capstone project presentations. First off is going to be Erica Forney, and she is going to be chatting a little bit about sensory processing and effective learning environments. So I'm super excited about this one. So I'll let you go ahead and take it away, Erica.
All right, thank you. So I'm Erica Forney, and my capstone is looking at its personal insights and professional impact using personal sensory experiences and lived experiences to create a more effective learning environment. Oh, okay, there we go. So this research will attempt to understand how we equip our teachers and professional staff on their wellness journeys of self-discovery in order to supply them with a bigger toolkit and understanding of in order to understand what their students are going through emotionally within their classrooms. So I started out with my research questions. My first one was, do you understand yourself? Why is it important to understand your own lived experiences and sensory preferences to be better equipped to understand your students? What kind of training or self-discovery can you do to better understand yourself? And will this understanding help create a safer and more effective classroom environment? So with those questions in mind, I started diving into the literature, and one of the things that I discovered was looking at staff mental health, obviously, is really important in classrooms. This quote from a research by Luther and Mendez said, "When teachers are well, their students do better." And I felt that that really kind of resonated with me. Teacher and staff burnout is at an all-time high, which creates environments that's not just good for the staff, but also not good for the students. Um, the lack of training teachers leave them with needs unmet, and difficulty with managing behaviors or even understanding where the behaviors come from. Some of the research reflected on teachers and staff needing to collaborate with professionals like occupational therapists, since we kind of understand those students better with regard to self-regulation and emotions within the classroom. Teachers also need to have an understanding of the classroom environment and the overall effect of that it has on the student's level of regulation throughout the day. Maybe it's auditory, maybe it's visual. And understanding the concept of co-regulation was reflected in some of the literature as well. What if you were experiencing similar challenges as the adult in the room? Teachers need to be equipped on how they feel about their own self-care and coping skills, possibly in the classroom. So this knowledge and understanding through training and self-discovery supports the understanding of oneself in order to improve resilience and the ability to be introspective. So my methodology, this research is the capstone was designed as a phenomenological qualitative research study with 3 levels of axial coding within and across all transcripts. The data was collected through semi-structured interviews. I obtained Elizabethtown IRB consent in September. The school district site consent took a little bit longer. There were a couple little hurdles, and that was not obtained until October in order to recruit participants from the school district. Participant consent was signed by each participant. So I was able to interview 10 public school professionals. The professionals, the experience was new teacher of 12 weeks to veteran staff of over 30 years. My participants were a speech and language pathologist, teacher of the visually impaired, a counselor, special education teachers and autistic support, paraprofessional, and regular education classroom teachers in the K-5 environment. So the results. I was able to get 6 main themes emerge from the data. The first theme was self-awareness. The participants were very self-aware. Many of them expressed sensory preferences as well as sensory aversions. In the area of auditory sensory preferences, it was more aversions to experiencing loud environments, maybe when there's competing noise. That was echoed through a couple participants. Some environmental sensory preferences where not being within crowded stores, bars. One participant expressed in a crowded Walmart on a Sunday. That's a problem. Um, there were there was a participant who expressed that they did not like touch. However, they did express at one point throughout the interview that their touch preferences changed with specifics, such as they enjoyed hugs from their children, spouses, specific friends. However, they were not a person who enjoyed touch. Um, Another area of sensory preferences was proprioceptive. There was a participant that discussed how they needed a lot of deep pressure, and some of the strategies that they talked about involved a lot of deep pressure, weighted items, those sort of things. Um, Tactile and texture sensory preferences. There were a few participants that talked about, and they were very animate about how their sheets and blankets had to have specific textures. One participant talked about them being real soft and how that was very comforting to them. Um, Another area of self-awareness was their self-regulation awareness, understanding what kind of strategies will reset them in order to kind of regulate themselves as they go from work to home, in order to be present. Another participant talked about if a day they started the day dysregulated, they may end the day dysregulated. So they really were very um, interested in discussing how like their regulation throughout the day really depended even on the morning. Another area of self-awareness was the physical reactions to sensory experiences. A participant talked about assemblies being really difficult, having like 15 conversations going on at once, trying to tune into everything, and that was a very overwhelming environment for them. They described it as trying to make sense of everything. Another participant talked about in a special education classroom, how often there's adults and kids, and that can become overwhelming when they're trying to get things done. They talked about things being ping-ponging around their brain, trying to get things looking busy, but maybe not actually getting something done. Another participant talked about liking the cold and said that when it is warm, that really bothers them and actually makes them feel like they can't breathe. Some self-awareness strategies were talked about at home and at work. Some home strategies were talking about taking a walk, exercise. Often exercise was mentioned at specific times of day. One participant said that in the morning, if they got exercise, they would feel like they were very regulated throughout the day. Um, Another participant talked about not liking socks and taking them off as soon as they got home. Another participant used crocheting as a way of self-regulation, and often will do the same pattern over and over again, just because they know what they're doing, and it just offered that like sameness. At work, a participant talked about wearing their AirPods as noise with the noise canceling on to kind of help that auditory overstimulation. Another participant talked about part of their job is moving around the building, and that really helped them regulate throughout the day. And then there were a few participants that actually talked about controlling the level of noise within their room. Another area of self-awareness that was discussed was stress and anxiety. I really liked one of the participants really put a visual to how they describe they feel stress and how they feel how they described how they feel anxiety. That participant said when they're stressed, they're weighted down, they feel like they're carrying a bag of bricks. However, anxiety was quite the opposite, where they described it as a character in Mary Poppins, where they just kept floating higher and higher and kind of brought it all full circle and said that those weighted blankets and weighted items really help them kind of come down from that. Other things that they expressed as far as stress and anxiety, um, separating times, um, getting busy, that sort of thing, getting short with people, freezing up, and just not being able to change gears like they need to. Some strategies that the participants discussed for stress and anxiety at home, medication was discussed, therapy, exercise. One participant talked about grounding techniques that their therapist had given them. At work, it seemed that there were a few participants that talked about work being a environment where they were able to turn it off for a few hours. When they see the kids, that kind of brought them down and kind of got rid of that for the day. Um, Another participant discussed the point of eating lunch together with a coworker every day. It was 30 minutes, and they just kind of distanced themselves from work. The last area of self-awareness that the participants talked about was lived experiences. I described lived experiences to them as like things that have shaped them over the course of their lives. So just to give you an idea of how it was described to them. And some were positive and some were negative. There was a participant who talked about how that they understand what it's like to have and have not. They went from living middle class, being in poverty, actually being homeless at one point. One of my participants talked about growing up as a child of two teachers who often went across the states on car trips throughout the summer, and they felt that that kind of gave them a sense of flexibility in life, and they attributed a lot of their flexibility now to growing up in that kind of environment. Another participant shared that they had a student, they have a child with disabilities, and they felt that having that experience was, it allowed them the ability to understand on a personal level of what parents are going through as well as the students. The second theme focused on self-care, strategies for building resilience and well-being. Again, just like self-awareness, the participants seem to understand how they do self-care. Some things that were talked about were picking up groceries as opposed to going through the store, journaling, taking time just to sit, taking time to talk to their spouse or friends. Not bringing work home was actually a big one that a lot of the participants talked about. Walking, drinking more water, making healthier choices with food, watching TV, and reading a book. The third theme was reflections on trauma-informed competency. So student awareness, barriers, professional growth, and potential pathways forward. So one of the participants talked about how they don't think that everyone understands how children experience trauma. It doesn't have to be like they described as watching a parent die. It can be something much different than that. Another participant talked about how there's lack of training within the district, and they described it as not really knowing how to deal with the student, and then it often turns into behavior issues within the school. Some of the barriers discussed were not enough training, not a good understanding. Um, they haven't made the like habits to their classroom routine, like maybe trauma-informed strategies placed in the classroom, not enough experience. One participant talked about HIPAA laws getting in the way. They felt that not getting some maybe really important information about a student might affect how they treat that student, or they felt it was a detriment to them. Some of the needs that came out of talking to the participants was having more in-service time, more immersive. That was an idea that was reflected through a few participants. They felt that having something that was more geared at them and their experience would be helpful. And one participant mentioned having a trauma liaison, ongoing training, things that are meaningful for them. They felt that maybe a smaller group, the district often has large group presentations for trauma-informed care, and they thought maybe something that was ongoing and smaller would be helpful. Theme 4, professional development, the good and the bad. So there was talks about the pros although the cons seem to outweigh the pros. The pros were there's more diversity, more cultural awareness, and it's becoming more inclusive for staff. The cons, unfortunately, not relevant topics. Often the trainings are optional. The timing was described as not always the best timing. Um, and then often not taken by the people that should be taking these trainings. Theme 5 is student sensory awareness. So, part of my research talked about understanding oneself in order to understand the student. Something that was overall looking at the student sensory awareness, I found that the participants weren't necessarily aware of the student sensory needs in order to support them. There were reflections of I try, but sometimes it's not, on the forefront of their brain. It's hard to figure out sometimes if it's inattention, anxiety, or sensory because they can all look the same. Um, some people just, I'm not good at it. I don't understand. I'm not looking for that in maybe the students that are not identified. Some strategies and resources. I found that one-on-one providers had a better handle on the sensory piece, um, taking breaks for not only the student to regulate, but maybe for them throughout a session. Classroom teachers did have some good strategies that they talked about, as in check-ins, environmental strategies, maybe they mostly discussed auditory strategies, keeping the classroom at a calm, um, a good noise level. Resources and tools within the classroom, whole class breaks, um, and then some of the resources that they identified within the schools that are available to them, not always used, but are available, are sensory rooms, fidgets, calm corners, crash pads, swings, and noise canceling headphones. And lastly, theme 6 is navigating the barriers in education, time limitations, district challenges, and staff misunderstanding. Um, there was talk about everybody's schedules being packed, not having time to even just get to the bathroom, um, just breathe throughout the day. Some district imposed challenges were lack of acknowledgement, dissemination of information regarding specific students, and lack of training. And then misunderstandings among staff. Maybe that particular participant talked about not understanding how brain breaks should be used, or how some of the fidgets and how some of the things within the classroom that are given to teachers, how they should be used as proactive strategies versus something that was more reactive. So the discussion was definitely evident that the participants have a great awareness of themselves, their sensory preferences, their lived experiences, their self-regulation, their self-care. What they were lacking was the understanding of their students. Um, Even just connection of that trauma-informed strategies and sensory strategies, I found throughout the literature needs more research. Because I did find, there are connections between those. I found one research study that supported it. The literature does support the need for collaboration to disseminate information, more training, and the importance of self-care. So where do we go from here? There's definitely within the district a defined need for more and specific trainings. Some things that were discussed by the participants were sensory strategies and trauma-informed practice, that they reflected on that as being something that they didn't feel very competent in. Um, Maybe possibly program development within the district. Maybe this research can lead to that. And collaboration with other professionals that may have experience in trauma-informed practice as well as sensory. Um, I would like to acknowledge my husband and my kids. My husband told me not to go get a doctorate, and I didn't listen to him. Um, and my kids have been very supportive and tolerant of me throughout this process. Dr. Tamara Humbert has been an amazing guide and resource throughout this whole process. I much, much appreciate her. I'd also like to thank my family, my friends, and my colleagues for all their support throughout this. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Erica. Like you said, any questions, feel free to unmute yourself. You can put it in the chat. I'll be looking at that as well.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So Erica, a great job. Thank you
Thank
for sharing your information with us. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Yeah, and you can refuse to answer or you
All
can
right.
defer. You can defer. So again, I'm very grateful to have had the privilege to work with you on this project and to get a sense of what people are saying. And so we have talked about this, and I think it was certainly implicit in your presentation that there is a journey that people go on in terms of being able to really embrace and utilize effectively these strategies for trauma-informed practice. And certainly self-awareness, self-lived experiences is helpful. And you found this gap. So just because you have self-awareness of your own sensory preferences doesn't mean that you can get there. And that certainly, again, education and having in-services is helpful, but there's something else missing, right? That's really, we need to find out how to help people in that journey. So can you reflect on your own journey? Like what things helped you get from this understanding of yourself to the point of embracing and utilizing and trying to incorporate sensory issues, sensory concerns, and trauma-informed practice?
Wow, that is a big question.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say my own journey, I feel like I definitely have a good feel for my sensory preferences. I mean, I feel like that was even pre going into OT school. So understanding myself, I definitely understood. I've worked with kids for such a long time that I feel like just experience has helped me understand them and maybe even trial and error that has happened over the years. Um, the hmm. So the journey to let me go back to your question. So you were you're wanting to know how how I put those practices in place. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like it's definitely been a journey, and the more I learn, I will say the trauma-informed um, classes really opened my eyes to a lot more things. And I know you and I discussed about how sensory and trauma-informed strategies often mirror each other. And I really feel that the more I learned about trauma and those sort of strategies, I feel like I started implementing more of those things and making it so that I knew I had to do those kind of things. And then kind of figuring out like, well, does that work for everybody or is that just specific students? So um, I feel like it's still an ongoing journey. Did I answer every part of your question? It was a really big
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, it was a good question. But yes, it from what I gather from what you just said, it was very intentional, right?
Yeah.
So it was awareness and then the information and research about these, then really coming to the point of embracing it and being intentional
Yeah.
about using those
A-
practices.
And I do feel like it's ever changing. I feel like, especially in the area of trauma-informed practice, there's so much research to be done. And I'm really interested in hoping that, I can help some of that bridge for the professionals in the district.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it made me chuckle that you said that your husband said not to get a doctorate.
Oh, he told me we would get divorced.
Oh, goodness.
We did not. Although
Okay, good.
I made a promise that I would not go back to school ever again.
Okay, fair. It's a terminal degree, right?
Right, exactly. That's exactly.
So I guess my question is throughout this whole process of, the trauma-informed care, like your certificates and um, developing your capstone and carrying it through, was there any moment or what was your moment that was like your aha, oh my gosh, yes.
Um, I think thinking back to that, definitely the trauma informed care like certificate was like, okay, because I did take autism and that was my first one, but I've worked in autistic support for a really long time. Um, and then I think just even through the capstone, the aha was like just talking to people and understanding where they're coming from and understanding because I've provided some of the training to these participants and to realize that nobody's paid attention was kind of like, oh, we need a little bit more, and maybe it needs to be a little bit more to everyone as opposed to the people that just sign up. So I think that kind of was like my aha, like, oh goodness, I feel like I don't want to say I failed them, but I feel like I have some ownership to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? We have like 2 more minutes until Jess is up. Well, thank you so much, Erica. That was great. I am going to stop the recording right now.
Stop sharing.